Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. Glad to be joining you for another day of the podcast. Got a lot to talk about. And as always, if you are coming to the show for various reasons, whether you're coming for Mississippi State coverage, whether you're coming for movie and television coverage, or whatever else it may be, check the show notes. I'll have those listed for you guys so you can tune into whatever it is that you prefer to listen to. As always, we'll be starting with Mississippi State coverage because that's where probably most of my listeners are coming from. So I will start with it almost every single time that we record. So just letting you guys know off the top of the show. We got lots to talk about today, so we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But I want to remind everyone, if you are on YouTube, you can watch the show on YouTube. I have a lot of people doing that. I actually have more people doing it, watching the show on YouTube than I have listening on some of the other podcast apps. So that is a possibility for you if you're interested in doing so. If you're on Spotify, you can also watch the show there. I do a video podcast and upload it to Spotify when I'm uploading the show to all of the platforms. If you're on TikTok, I'm uploading clips there. So if you come across some part of the show and you're like, hey, I would kind of like to share that one little section there, check out TikTok. I do occasionally post those. I post them throughout the course of over the course of a few days. So you can check out TikTok. You can find me on it, and you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, all the platforms out there. And I would appreciate it if you followed and subscribed, whatever it may be. I would appreciate that. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. That would really help me out a lot. You would just do me a big favor in hitting subscribe. I know some of you are just going through and finding it, but if you're on any of the other platforms, following helps as well. Like I said, even if I'm getting the views, it helps even further if you hit that subscribe button or that follow button, because it makes the show get out to more people. And speaking of getting out to more people, if you're on Apple or Spotify, if you're hitting follow, I would appreciate that. And if you're also rating it, I would appreciate that as well. So like I said, all those things help me get the podcast out into the ears of new listeners. All right. Like I said, I have a lot to talk about. Big weekend for Mississippi State. Not really a whole lot of good news, except for one thing. If you've been hoping for Lane Kiffin to leave, that helps. But got a lot to talk about with what happened on the field and on the court for the Bulldogs. The only other thing I'm going to be talking about today will be the premiere of Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1. We'll talk about those first 4 episodes. And I'm probably going to go into a little bit more detail than I normally do on the TV stuff. So if you're wanting to hear about Stranger Things, if you're a huge fan of it, kind of like I am, I will definitely be breaking that down later on in the show. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start with the Mississippi State results of the week. Mississippi State, let's start with football. Obviously, the Mississippi State Bulldogs go down to the Ole Miss Rebels 38-19 in the Egg Bowl. I'm not going to try to give you a whole lot of recap about it. I'm just going to kind of give you my thoughts on what this means for the program and what it means for Mississippi State going forward. Just real quick, it was a disappointing result. You had a week and a half, you had almost 2 full weeks to get ready for this game. And for a while, it looked like Mississippi State was going to be able to compete, and it looked like Mississippi State had a chance in this thing. But once Ole Miss went and scored that touchdown right before the half, you kind of felt like it was over. I was kind of holding out hope that maybe Mississippi State could respond when they got the ball in the second half and score their own touchdown and cut the lead back down to 3. Back down to 3. That was not to be the case, unfortunately. Mississippi State just ends up scoring a field goal. They were down 8 points at that point, and that was as close as they ever got. Things you like, obviously, we got Kamario Taylor for the entire game. He never came out. You know what? You kind of feel bad a little bit for Blake Shaven because they wait until the very last game to make this change. I mean, you kind of feel bad for him, but it was the right call. It's what should have been done. But that's kind of the frustrating part about this is so many people have been calling, you need to make a change at quarterback. This offensive line isn't good enough to protect Blake Shapen. So you got to make a change. You just have to make a change at some point, because the only person who can just do anything with the offensive line that is just so poor at creating protection for your quarterback is Kamario Taylor. And week after week after week, Jeff Lebby just refused to make that change. He thought he got talked about wasted play and all this type of stuff. And I would love to know what it was about this week that he decides, okay, now we need to make a change. Because I'll be real honest with you, what should have happened is when Blake Shapen went to get extra eligibility, because he applied for and received an extra year of eligibility. And I'm sure Mississippi State encouraged him to do so if he wanted to. But what should have happened is you signed Luke Cromenhawk in the transfer portal. You signed Kamario Taylor in the incoming signing class. What should have happened with both of those players is you should have told Blake Shapen when he was contemplating coming back, or whether or not, or if Jeff Lebby asked him to go do so, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have tried to get an extra year of eligibility for Blake Shapen. You should have realized what you had with your offensive line. And I know they tried to get a couple of pieces and they just didn't work out in terms of improving the offensive line to the transfer portal. But you should have looked at what you had, and you should have seen that Blake Shapen was either going to do what he did this year and basically stay healthy pretty much for the entire season and just not be effective because he's not mobile enough to use the offensive line that's in front of him. So you had that one option, or he was going to end up getting himself killed, kind of like he did the previous season, get hurt and not be available for the rest of the season. It should have been, Blake, we appreciate you. We appreciate you trying to come and help us get this thing started under Jeff Lebby. If you want another year of eligibility, that's great. Feel free to go transfer, head to another school that could use your services, that has a better offensive line, that can protect you and can provide a place for you to showcase what you're capable of. Because I do believe that Blake Shapen, and I said this in some of the previous episodes, I do believe that Blake Shapen has the talent and ability to have contributed to teams. I think he could have done that, but not with this team, because this team had an offensive line that couldn't protect him well enough. He is mobile enough to be able to move around in a pocket that does not just completely collapse on him. He is mobile enough to be able to do that. But the problem is he's not mobile enough when the pocket just instantly collapses as soon as the snap starts, and as soon as the play starts, he's going down. There was probably 5 or 6 plays where Blake Shapen would have taken a sack and lost 6-7 yards in the first half alone. I made a note on Twitter, and I put something out on Twitter when we were watching the game on on Friday, and said, we went a whole quarter without giving up a sack. Who would have thought? And that was because Kamario Taylor made things happen and was able to escape the pressure because of his mobility and because of just his athleticism. He was able to do so. And we saw the results. This is what should have happened the entire time. You should have just told Blake Shapen, we appreciate what you did for us last year, trying to come in. We know you got hurt, but we're going to go ahead and move on to Kamario Taylor or Luke Cromenhawk, because you had 3 quarterbacks on the roster. You have those 2 guys, and you find somebody else. I don't know. You go find yet another quarterback in the transfer portal, a guy that you know is probably never going to play, is just a safety blanket. That's what you should have done. And if you had done that, I still think you'll win every single game. The only game I think that would have been in question that you won this year would have been the Arizona State game. Would Kamario Taylor have been ready to step up in that situation? I think he would have. I think if you had given Kamario Taylor all 4 games all 4 non-conference games prior to the conference slate getting started, I think he gets enough experience and enough composure under his belt that he's effective, and he wins at least the Florida game. At the very least, he wins that game, and he has a chance to win, I think, the Texas game. I think he has a really good chance to win that, and who knows what he can do and how much better he'd be off by the time we get to Ole Miss and Missouri and all these other places, and who knows what's capable. Look, I don't think they would have won like 10 games or anything like that, but there is a possibility that this team could have won like 7-8 games that if you have Kamario Taylor back there at quarterback. That's the frustrating part about this. And that's what makes it just so infuriating trying to support this team under Jeff Lebby. Look, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you right now. When Jeff Lebby was hired at the end of 2023, when they made the decision to hire him, I wasn't really covering Mississippi State at the time. I'd kind of taken a break from Mississippi State coverage, and I was moved on to movies and television. But I chimed in on Twitter just like everybody else was, because I still provide my opinion I was still providing my opinion on Twitter. And I said, I'm not just real thrilled with this. I wasn't a huge fan of the hire. I thought it was a lazy hire when Zach Selman decided to hire Jeff Lebby and to bring him in. And I made despite the fact that everybody else was like, oh, what an offense. Look at how many points he puts up and how many yards he puts up at Oklahoma. That's going to be great to bring in here. My thought was, this guy is in his 30s. He's a young guy. He hasn't done anything close to this at the head coaching level. I don't think he's ready for this. And people pushed back on me so hard. And one of the reasons why I didn't think he was ready is because of the stuff with his father-in-law. Look, his father-in-law had as unceremonious exit from Baylor as you could possibly have. He, as successful as he was, you would think somebody would have taken a chance on him if they thought it was worth it. And nobody has. Art Browse cannot get a job. And every time he has tried to get a job, whatever institution has hired him has been so disgraced by the blowback on it that they end up having to let him go. And I told people, I was like, I just don't think this guy is mature enough, and I don't think he's ready to take on the head coaching position, because the same year that we hired Jeff Lebby, like the second or third game of the year, he brings his father-in-law onto the field at Oklahoma prior to the game, and he gets ripped to shreds over it. And look, if he had just said, you know what, I realized I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done that, that would have been fine. But the problem is he doubles down on it. And like, after all the people who are calling him out for it, he doubles down on it by putting the picture of him and his father-in-law as his profile picture on Twitter. It takes somebody, my guess would probably be Zach Selman would have been one of them, because he was still the associate AD at the time, or assistant AD at the time at Oklahoma. It takes somebody calling him into the office and saying, hey, you can't do this. You got to fix this. And so he goes and apologizes and says, you know what, I was mistaken. It took somebody pulling him aside saying, you got to fix this. He didn't realize that on his own. Look, I get that's his father-in-law. I get it. He's more than welcome to associate with his family. I have no problem with that. He can come and visit. He can come to the games and sit in the stands. Have no issue with that whatsoever. I have no problem with Art Browse doing any of that. But you bring him onto the field and you make him in Oklahoma gear. I was like, he's not ready for this. He doesn't understand he doesn't understand what it takes to be a head coach. And people came at me so hard saying, you don't get it. It's fine. His father was never declared guilty. He wasn't declared guilty of anything because he wasn't on trial for anything. Nobody ever accused the guy of committing a crime. They just accused him of doing some incredibly unethical behavior. That's the difference. But everybody came at me and I was like, that's fine. If you're right, great. We'll be in great shape. What have we gotten in the 2 years since? We have gotten one SEC win. We've gotten a coach who has gone 7-17. We've gotten a guy who hired a special teams coach to be his defensive coordinator because that's his bud. That's what we've gotten with Jeff Lebby. And I try to tell people that this was a lazy hire by Zach Selman, and that this is not the direction that our program needed to go in. And everybody came at me and they yelled at me and said, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't get it. Tell me I don't get it. When we are 7-17 in 2 years after the Jeff Lebby experience. And if you have any faith that it's going to be better next year, I would love to know what you're basing it on besides Kamario Taylor. because we're going to talk on Wednesday about the recruiting when we get the signing classes come in. We'll talk about that then, because we got issues there. We got all kinds of issues there. This coaching staff isn't recruiting at all. So like I said, besides Kamario Taylor, what are you basing, the fact that you think this team's going to be better next year? Because I don't. I mean, the schedule is going to be easier, so maybe you can get a couple more wins, but I just don't have any faith in this coaching staff to figure this thing out. It's a bunch of guys that he hired his butt. And I'll be honest, I don't know that he's going to make changes. He hasn't made changes yet, and I've heard that there's the possibility that they may make changes after signing day comes and goes. And if they do, great. Okay, that'll be fine. We'll make changes then. But I don't know that that's going to happen. I really don't. Last year, he kept Coleman Hutzler because he said we needed continuity. We need to keep all of our staff as much as possible, just for that continuity reason. And I feel like that he's going to do the exact same thing again. I don't think Jeff Lebby is ready to be the coach. Look, I hope he proves me wrong next year. I thought he might have. Look, I was honest. I'll be honest. I thought, okay, after the first 4 games, and even after the Tennessee game, I was like, you know what? He may be more ready than I thought he was. You won 4 games. You beat Arizona State. You found a way to win a game that you had kind of given away against Arizona State, and you had opportunities to win against Tennessee, a much more talented Tennessee team than you were. I was like, okay, you know what? He might have a chance here. He might be more ready, but no, that's not the case at all. He loses basically 7 of the next 8 games. And yeah, 7 of the next 8 games. And even worse, after your first win, your first SEC win as a coach, your first SEC win in 2 years against Arkansas, which should have been something that you build upon, something that kind of propels you to better days. Not only does it not make you, not only does it not make you better, you get worse. You play your 3 worst games of the year after your first SEC win. 41-21 to Georgia, 49-27 to Missouri, 38-19 to Ole Miss. Those were the 3 results that Mississippi State produced after getting their first SEC win in 2 years. Zach Arnett must be laughing his head off at this, because it took us 2 years under Jeff Lebby to get back to the exact same level that we were under Zach Arnett. This is the exact same season that we had with Arnett. Arnett's season was 1 SEC win against a really bad Arkansas team, 1 upset win against, and at the time it wasn't an upset because we were favored, but 1 upset win against a team from Arizona in the Pac-12/Big 12. You win the rest of your non-conference games, and that's it. You go 5-7. That's exactly what happened this year. We beat Arkansas, a really bad Arkansas team. We beat a team from the Big 12/Pac-12 in Arizona State from Arizona. We won the rest of our non-conference games, and that was it. That was all that we could win. We were right back to where we were under Zach Arnett. Now, you can make the argument that we had a much tougher schedule, and we did, but you had opportunities to win, and you couldn't do it. And a lot of it is because of coaching decisions. I mean, the decision to keep running Blake Shapen out there is one. The fact that you can't get your players disciplined enough on the field to not commit stupid penalty after stupid penalty, that is a coaching issue. I mean, most of the reason why Mississippi State is 5-7 and not 7-5 or 8-4 is because of coaching. And that's on Lebby, and that's on his staff. So, like I said, I don't have any faith that this team is going to get better next year. If you do, great. I don't. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, because otherwise we're going to be looking for another coach next year. And look, if he does actually fire Hutzler, I don't know who they're going to get, because you are going into a situation with Jeff Lebby where the coach is on the hot seat. And it's going to be hard to pull somebody knowing that they may only be here for a year if things don't get substantially better. So I don't know how that's going to play out. We'll have to wait and see on it, but the future is just, it's very, very bleak. It really is. And let's go ahead and talk about the coaching changes that took place over the weekend. The conference is getting better. Look, Florida, I truly do believe that they got better with their hire. They hired Tulane's coach, Summerall. I think that guy's a good coach. That's a guy that I actually kind of would have liked to have seen us hire, but nobody wanted it because his offense he's a defensive guy. He doesn't have a flashy offense. We don't score any points. We got to get past this obsession with trying to get a flashy, high scoring offense. We got to get past this. We do. I would much rather win games than try to put out an offense that scores 40 points a game. Give me a guy that knows how to keep the other team at bay and put points on the board as well. Like I said, we didn't want to hire Summerall because everybody thought he would have put a boring offense on the field. We got to get past this. Would you rather win games or put 40 points on the board and lose 55-45? Because that's kind of what we're doing at this point. So like I said, I think Florida's going to be better because they hired Summerall. They're not happy about it. They think this is just Billy Napier 2.0, and maybe it is. I don't know. But I think Summerall is going to be good. I think Auburn did a great job of getting Alex Golish. I think they just did an amazing job again. Credit to John Cohen. A lot of people didn't think he would pull it off. And look, maybe he's not going to be very good. I don't know. But I think they've improved quite a bit. Obviously, LSU has improved quite a bit. They get Lane Kiffin. We're going to talk about that quite a bit here in a little bit. But they get Lane Kiffin, so they're obviously in much better shape than they were. You look at Arkansas and Ole Miss. I don't think either of these teams are going to be better. Look, Ryan Silverfield is a fine coach. He's perfectly okay, but he's not great. I mean, Memphis should have been a lot better. They end up beating South Florida to put themselves in position to go to the college football playoff, and they lose a couple of games that they inexplicably should not have lost. And that's kind of just the deal. That's just kind of the deal with Silverfield. He's a fine coach, but there's going to be at least one or two, maybe even 3 games every single season that he loses that he shouldn't lose. And that's going to be a lot harder to swallow when you're Arkansas. Look, Arkansas is going to have to come to terms with something. And they're just, ever since Texas A&M came into the league, it's been much harder for Arkansas to stay competitive and to be competitive. And the reason for it is quite simply because Arkansas, the talent level in Arkansas just isn't there. It just isn't. My nephew played for the state champ, the team that was the state champion in, I think, 2019. He played for the team that won the state championship at the highest level, like the 7A level in the state of Arkansas. And none of that team ended up going to a Power 4 school, except for the kicker, who is Kyle Ferry. I think he was on that team, if I'm not mistaken. But that's the only one that made it to a Power 4 school. That's it. And that says something. Like, the best team in your biggest division can't get a single person onto a Power 4 roster. That says something. So the school has to go into other states. They used to rely so much on Texas because the one thing that Arkansas used to offer was they offered the ability for Texas kids to play in the SEC and not have to go that far from home. Well, they don't have that anymore. Texas A&M took that away from them, and now Texas is here, and it's even worse because there's now 2 options for Texas kids. So they've got to figure out how they're going to make things work in Arkansas. And look, Mississippi State has their own issues. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But then you have Ole Miss, and look, I get Ole Miss fans are ticked off. They should be. I would be ticked off too in their situation. When you reach the pinnacle of the sport, you're going to play in the college football playoff. You're making your first appearance in the college football playoff. Now, granted, it is the expanded 12-team version of the college football playoff, not the 4-team from a few years ago. You get to the college football playoff, and your coach bolts on you, and not only bolts on you, but tries to sabotage your entry into the college football playoff by taking all of the offensive coaches. Yeah, I'd be pissed off too. So I get that they are ticked off. And look, I said that Lane Kiffin should leave, and I think that he should have, because I think he'll have more opportunity. Look, it's just economics. It just is. It's economics. There's going to be more opportunity for Lane Kiffin to win at a high level if he is coaching at LSU instead of Ole Miss. There just is. I mean, there's a larger population, not a ton, but there's a larger population in Louisiana. There's not another SEC school in Louisiana besides LSU. They have bigger donors. They have a bigger stadium. It's just simple economics. There will be more resources, regardless of how much you spend in NIL, and regardless of how much you say you can continue to pay and you can continue to reach the same heights as the blue blood schools. It's just almost impossible for Mississippi State and Ole Miss to get to that point. Look, Ole Miss would do themselves a huge favor, and the fans would just do themselves a huge favor if they could just realize that what they want to be, the blue blood program that they really desperately want to be and think that they are, it's just not financially or economically conceivable. It's just not. Look, it is a sad realization, and they should come to this realization, but they are not going to come to this realization after this entire Lane Kiffin fiasco. They should come to the realization that Ole Miss and Mississippi State are one of two things. They are either a stepping stone school, or they are a school where a coach's career basically never takes off. Because that is what has happened to every Ole Miss and Mississippi State coach for decades now. The number of people who have retired at either of those schools are very rare exceptions. You got Jackie Sherrill, who retired there. That was going to be his last stop regardless, because of all the NCAA trouble that he had. The only time that he got really anybody really took a look at him was Alabama after the 2000 season. That was it. Nobody else really ever gave him a second thought. Nobody really looked at him because of all the NCAA stuff that kind of came with Jackie Sherrill. Mike Leach probably would have retired here just simply because the fact that he was older. I mean, he was in his 60s, and there's not a whole lot of schools that are going to hire coaches in their 60s if he'd continue to have success at Mississippi State. And who knows if he would have? I think he would have, but there's no telling about that. Other than that, almost every single coach has been fired. Croom, fired. Moorhead, fired. Dan Mullen is the exception. He found a job in another school, and it didn't go well for him. I mean, it started off pretty good, but didn't end very well for him. And that's kind of the case it is with Ole Miss. Houston Nutt, fired. Matt, what's his name? I can't remember whatever his name was. Fired. Hugh Freeze, fired. Or, I mean, he probably would have eventually got another job, but once NIL got here, we see what Hugh Freeze is. If he can't cheat and pay players under the table, there's no point in hiring Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze, fired. David Cutcliffe, fired. This is what happens at Ole Miss. You either get fired or you become a stepping stone. Lane Kiffin, stepping stone. He's going to a better job. Tommy Tuberville, stepping stone. He went to a better job. That's what these two programs are. And look, it's kind of sucks to make that realization. It does, but it's once you understand what you are, you can be okay with it. And look, I know a lot of people are saying Pete Golding, he's going to be great. He's going to do great things. Maybe he does, but to assume that is a bit much. If you told me coming out of this thing that would have been their best option, I would have been, I'll be honest, I'm very surprised that this is the route they went down. I don't know why they didn't just put an interim tag on him. I mean, this is so much like what had happened with Mississippi State when they lost Mike Leach. I don't know how they're going to recover from this. Look, Pete Golding, they may not fall as far as State did. They may not. I don't know. They could, they couldn't. I have no idea. But it is so similar because they get blindsided by their losing their coach for very different reasons, obviously. And then they give their defensive coordinator the full, you are now our coach, not interim coach, but you're now our coach. And he hasn't done anything to prove it. Like I said, I just don't understand why they didn't at least try to put an interim tag on him and do a search. Keith Carter, a lot of people say Keith Carter handled this. A lot of people say Keith Carter handled this well. I don't think he did. I think he handled a lot of this poorly. At some point, you should have known that he was going, and you should have just told Kiffin, see ya. I know there's all the stuff about buyout, all this type of stuff. Like, if you want to go ahead and go now. We're going to just go ahead and transition without you. And you could have been in a better position to hire yourself a better coach, because once Kiffin finally decided to leave, that's when all the dominoes fell. Figure it out. You got lawyers. Everybody talks about that buyout. Did Ole Miss not put a mitigation clause on Kiffin's contract where if they fire him, that he has a duty to mitigate? Because almost every single contract has one of those on there. Did they not do that with Kiffin? Because he had another job lined up. They wouldn't have had to have paid him, because if there is a mitigation clause, you don't have to pay him if he gets another job. And like I said, I don't know. I would assume that Ole Miss did that. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. But like I said, I don't get why they think hiring Pete Golding is going to keep them in good shape, because I just don't get it. So, all right. Anyway, I'll be very interested to see what happens with Ole Miss in this playoff. I really will. I don't know how they're going to. I'll be real honest with you. There is a possibility they don't make the playoff. I think Alabama did them a huge favor, because if Alabama doesn't win that Iron Bowl and they end up going to the SEC championship game, and they don't have an offensive coaching staff to go in and play Georgia, they probably end up getting smoked. Look, I know the players are more important than the coaching staff, but you have to have a game plan. You have to have something to be able to put on the field, and to be able. Because I don't know who of their remaining offensive coaches that are there have enough familiarity with the offense and understand it to be able to call the plays. I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, they've got a running backs coach that's still there, an offensive line coach that's still there. And I think that's it on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe a tight ends coach. I don't know. Or I don't know if the wide receivers coach and tight ends coach are the same or not. But I know they lost their wide receivers coach. They lost their offensive coordinator. So like I said, I'll be very interested to see what happens, because there is a case to be made that they shouldn't be in the playoff, or at the very least that they should go down in seeding. I think they'll still be in the playoff, but I think there's a very good chance that they're going to be on the road for the first game after all this has taken place. I really do kind of think that they're going to get pushed down. We'll see when the rankings are announced. When the rankings are announced on Tuesday, what they do with Ole Miss, because I don't know. I don't know. And like I said, there is a case to be made to even take them completely out. And Ole Miss fans aren't going to like it, but there are going to be coaches, there are going to be ADs that are going to be out there stumping for their schools and saying, "Hey, why are we being left out behind Ole Miss when you have no idea what kind of an output are we going to get from those guys without their offensive coaching staff, without their head coach?" Like I said, I don't know how it's going to play out, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see. So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about the basketball team. I thought I was going to have some good things to talk about with the basketball team for at least a little bit, and then it kind of all fell apart. They barely beat University of New Orleans on Monday night last week, and then they turned around, and on Friday, we thought we were going to have something to kind of like, oh, okay, maybe things are okay. Maybe we got something to look at positively here with the basketball team, because they were up by like 8 points on a pretty good SMU team, and then they just blow it. Then they just absolutely blow it. They had like an 8-point lead with like 5 minutes left to play, and SMU comes all the way back. They tie the game up. They go to overtime, and Mississippi State just lays an egg in the overtime. I don't know what to make of this basketball team. I don't know what has happened to Chris Jans. The fact that he barely beats a University of New Orleans team, and his team just completely wilts under the pressure against a good team. Like I said, I don't know. I really don't want to call for his job, because I thought he did such a great job those first 2 seasons. Thought last year was a little bit of a disappointment, but it's getting really difficult to suggest that Chris Jans still knows what he's doing. He still has the capability to lead this team. This is one of the most disappointing seasons that we've had as a Mississippi State fandom. I mean, think back to 2001 football team. That was probably as disappointing as this has been so far. Um, 2022 baseball team coming straight off the national championship, and you don't even you finish dead last in the SEC. I mean, these those are the types of disappointments, and you'll notice those coaches didn't last much longer after. Jackie Shearer only lasted a couple more years after that 2001 season, and Chris Lemonis only lasted a couple seasons after that 2022 season. Chris Jans needs to figure this out, and I'm starting to wonder if just his style of play, this hard-nosed defensive style play, just isn't going to cut it anymore in college basketball, because we have so much of the NBA style of basketball starting to come down into the college levels and the college ranks. I'm starting to wonder there's a possibility that he doesn't have it anymore, and I hope that's not the case, but it's a valid question, and I don't know the answer to it. I just don't know how this is all going to play out, because it seems like the college game has just changed too much for what he has done in the past to still be effective. He's never had a team that's been just a high-scoring, great-scoring team. He's just never had that in his time at Mississippi State, or really, from what I can tell, anywhere else. And I just don't get it. So, like I said, I hope I'm wrong. I'm hoping that he can figure this out. I'm hoping that when they take on Georgia Tech, I don't remember what day this week they take on Georgia Tech, but whatever day they take on Georgia Tech this week, I'm hoping that we see a little bit more signs of life from them, and we can kind of get this ship righted. Because right now there is no path to the NCAA tournament. They pretty much need to win every single non-conference game from here on out to even have a chance. And they got some tough games left on the schedule before they get to SEC play. So anyway, we'll see how that plays out. But right now it's just not looking real good. So, all right, let's talk about something that's a little bit more fun to talk about, something I've enjoyed a little bit more. Let's talk about the first 4 episodes of the 5th season of Stranger Things. I'll just go ahead and tell you this right now. There will be spoilers for this. I don't typically try to do spoilers, but I want to talk a little bit more in depth about the first 4 episodes of this. So there will be spoilers. Episode 1 of season 5 is called The Crawl. I'll just go ahead and tell you this much right now. I really enjoyed these 4 episodes. I thought these were really good. The critics have not been quite as enthusiastic about it, but I love these episodes. I thought they were just really, really phenomenal. I was into them pretty much from the get-go. I will say this, that this very first episode, The Crawl, a little bit exposition heavy, a little bit information dump heavy, because there's a lot of information that they have to kind of get fed to you so that you can be ready to understand what's all taking place in this very, very new world that they are kind of living in, where the Upside Down has broken into Hawkins, Indiana. So like I said, it was a little bit of a slog there, but I will just say this: the information dump that they're doing with Maya Hawke is just absolutely phenomenal. She is just absolutely great in this series. Ever since they added her in season 3, she's been phenomenal, and doing her thing, her Rockin' Robin thing at the Squawk, that radio station that they have. Her and Steve, played by Joe Keery, that was really just a phenomenal sequence. So, like, doing an exposition dump, that was about as well as you could have done it. The problem that you have is you kind of have to do another exposition dump about 10 minutes later when you're trying to explain what a crawl is and how this is going to work and how all this is going to take place. So it starts to be a little bit much. But once they kind of start that crawl, the episode just really picks up and really takes off. Everything kind of starts falling apart. I love the fact that they're approaching this like, this is the 37th one we've done. Nothing's ever happened. And, like they're really stressing the fact that this quadrant they're doing, G1, there's nothing there. Why are we really worried about it? Like I said, I loved all that stuff. And the fact that, it all goes to hell is just absolutely phenomenal. I was really into it. I thought this first episode was just really good to get things started. It's my least favorite of the 4. I will say that. It is my least favorite of the 4, but I thought it was still just a really solid opening for this 5th season. Episode 2, which would be The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler. Really good. I love the fact they are bringing in a character who has been the absolute definition of a background character up until this point in Holly Wheeler, Mike, and what's her name's? I always forget Nancy. Mike and Nancy's younger sister. I love the fact they are bringing her into the foreground. And look, it's a brand new actress. And this is a 13-year-old girl. My guess is that she's supposed to be like 7 or 8 or something like that. But it's a 13-year-old girl that they brought into it. And she's just really, really good. I love what they did with her. But bringing her into the foreground, making her an important part of the show was just brilliant in my estimation, because they're revisiting a lot of what happened in season 1 and a lot of what happened in season 2, which was surprising as well, because I know a lot of people weren't just huge fans of season 2, but bringing her in and having them focus on her a little bit, I thought was the right call. And I love the way they are breaking them up, because they do this in almost every season. They kind of pair off or group off their cast members, and they've got some really interesting groupings, because you got basically Hopper and Elle working through their issues inside the Upside Down throughout the course of this entire thing. You've got what are supposed to be older teens. Now they'd be in their 20s, but they're all kind of in their 30s, with Jonathan, with Joe, no, not Joe Carey, with Steve, with Nancy, and you got Dustin kind of joining that group as well. I thought that was a great grouping. Then you've got Mike, you've got Mike. Well, you got Will and Maya Hawke's character. What is Robin? Will and Robin kind of paired off as well. I thought that just works really well, because they're the LGBTQ version of the show. So like I said, the pairings are great. I love what they're doing with them. I love the fact that the two adults in this, Hopper and Joyce, are just like so overprotective of their children in this thing, and they're kind of exposing each other, because they're calling each other out despite the fact they can't see that they're doing the same thing. So like I said, there's a lot of things I love about what they're doing in here. I love what we get from at the end of episode 1 from the Wheeler mom. I can't remember her name, but the actress' name is Cara Buono. Great standoff between her and that Demogorgon. That was just absolutely phenomenal. I thought that was just absolutely a work of art. I was starting to get a little frustrated throughout these first 2 episodes, because we weren't getting any of Max in this thing. Sadie Sink was just sitting in a hospital bed in a coma. I was like, please tell me that's not how we're using this character. Please tell me that's not all we're doing for this character. And when she shows up at the very end of episode 2, perfect deployment of her. And to have her kind of be in this space as well, along with Holly, they're using her, like I said, they kind of wrote themselves into a corner by putting her in a coma. But the way that they're using her, where it feels like she's going to be fighting Vecna on inside of his mind, and everybody else is going to be fighting him out in the world. I think this is just a really phenomenal decision, and just a great way to use her. And it has worked really well for me so far. Chapter 3, the Turnbow Trap. They introduced a new character, Derek Turnbow. I don't know I have not really kind of kept up on what the internet has thought about this character. I loved him. I thought he was great. I thought this was just an absolute amazing addition to the cast. I thought who plays Derek? Let me see if I can find out who plays him, because I can't find him right now. Of course, I don't see him on IMDb. Anyway, I just thought, whoever he is, like I said, I think this guy's great. I think he's just absolutely fantastic. And he's annoying in episode 3, because the fact that he's just, I don't remember what they were calling him in the show, but they were making fun of him because he was just so obnoxious. But by the time we get to episode 4, which is Sorcerer, which is by far the best episode, he has evolved, because he's finally bought into what they've been telling him, and he's actually a part of the plan. I thought it was just a really great use of the character. I thought he was really good. He's annoying, but he's kind of charming all at the same time. Like I said, I really enjoyed Derek Turnbow. I thought he was a great addition. And let's just be honest, this is by far the best Will season. Will has, the second season was probably previously was his best season. Noah Schnapp has been fantastic in this season. He has just been absolutely wonderful. And the revelation of him having powers was done perfectly in my estimation. I thought they did a really good job of bringing this into the show. The fact that he's kind of confronted by Vecna before all this takes place, and Vecna is telling him the reason why I picked you, the reason why I can do all this is because you're weak, and the reason why I get these children is because they are both weak in mind and body. And like, that's one of the reasons why he goes after Will at the very beginning of this entire show. And then for Will basically to kind of understand like the fact that he has this connection to the hive mind and that he can use those same powers that Vecna has because he can tap into them. And for him to realize this at the moment when like all of his friends are getting ready to get slaughtered by Demogorgons was just really good. And to have him do this thing to the Demogorgons that Vecna was doing to all of his victims in season 4 was just absolutely great. And you get that moment at the end of episode 4 where he's wiping his nose after the nosebleed, like we've seen 11 do so many times throughout the course of the show. It's just really done well by the Duffer Brothers. You also get the revelation that what Hopper and Elle were hunting and tracking down in the Upside Down is actually her sister, number 8, I think is what number it was, but that we met in season 2, episode 7. A storyline that nobody liked, that I didn't like, that you can't really find anybody that enjoyed that storyline. But going back to it and possibly paying off and making it actually work is really exciting. I love it when shows do that. When they take a story, an aspect of their show that people are like, I wasn't really sure about that. And that wasn't really my favorite part. But when they go back to it and try to revisit and try to make it into something better, I love it when shows do that. And I think they've got a really good chance to do that with, the sister that we saw in season 2, because they've never really gone back to it and revisited at any point. Other thing, Linda Hamilton, in fantastic addition as just a character that Linda Hamilton plays nowadays, just this awful bad guy that she's just kind of done a really good job of playing nowadays. I thought that was a great addition to the cast. I'm hoping they use her a little bit more. I'm hoping we get more from her. I don't know how much we will get from her because I don't know what the military plot line will be throughout the rest of the show after the events that took place in episode 4. So we'll have to kind of wait and see on that. But I just thought it was just really good. And like I said, I've enjoyed these first 4 episodes. I can't wait to see what they do with the last 4 when we get them at Christmas and New Year's Eve. So looking forward to that. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. We have more to talk about next time I record. I'll probably record on Wednesday after National Signing Day. I'll talk more about Pluribus as well. I watched the 5th episode, so I'll give you my thoughts on it. A really solid episode of it. So appreciate you guys and everything that you've done. Like I said, if you haven't hit subscribe, if you haven't hit follow, I'd appreciate if you did. And until then, though, we'll see you then.